Welcome everyone to our webinar series in partnership with the Nebraska State Historic Preservation Office. Today we have Brooks Gentleman from Review Historic Window Company, who will provide us with an overview and discussion of historic window preservation and replacements. I would like to welcome all of our Main Street and network member communities to the webinar, as well as those of you who are involved in local preservation and community development activities across Nebraska. We would also like to extend a warm welcome to our out-of-state attendees from both the Main Street and historic preservation worlds who are joining us today as well. For those of you who don't know about the Nebraska Main Street Network, we encourage you to learn more about who we are and what we do. You can visit our website at www.nebraskamainstreet.org and learn more about how you, your community, or your business can join us. I have a couple of housekeeping items before we start. Please do ask questions. You can post questions during the program by using the chat or the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. I will be watching those while Brooks is presenting, and we will answer them all at the end. There will be plenty of time for Q&A. Kelly Bacon from the Nebraska State Historic Preservation Office is also with us today, and she can answer any questions related to any of their programs and some of the things that they see coming through their office. Please be sure to stay muted during the program so we don't have any distracting background noises or audio feedback. And if anyone has a problem or experiences technical issues during the presentation, please send me an email, echase@windstream.net, and we'll see what we can do to fix the problem. We will be recording the webinar so that you can access it later, and we will be sharing that link and some additional information and resources in a couple of days. And as always, Luke from Southeast Community College is with us just in case something happens. We want to thank Southeast Community College for being a partner with us for these webinars. So with that, I am going to turn the program over to Brooks.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Well, I feel very fortunate to be able to speak with the group this morning. Windows are a tough topic on a historic building, and it shouldn't be that difficult. But what makes a window problem an issue is that everyone's got an opinion on what you should do with historic windows. You talk to a historic window restoration company, they'll give you one answer. If you talk with a window distributor, they'll give you another. The State Preservation Office has their opinions. Architects have various viewpoints on windows. So it can be difficult to determine what avenue you should pursue for your building. And what I want to do here in our brief time is dive into the reasons that you would consider various courses of action, and kind of cut through the media that you're exposed to and some of the misinformation that's promulgated in the industry, and answer any questions that you might have, so that when you're approaching the window decision for your building, you'll have a better background to make the right decision for your structure. Give you a little bit of background on Review. We've been in the business for the historic window work for 29 years. I got into the window business by being a Pella distributor for 10 years prior to that. So we've worked on any kind of window installation. We do steel window restoration, wood window restoration. We specialize primarily in historic commercial properties rather than residential. And we do all the field labor associated with the work. We also have done a lot of work with window replacement and have used the major window brands in our work too. So we are very, very familiar with whether you're replacing or are restoring existing windows. It's type of projects that Review works on, like state capitals and courthouses, office buildings, museums, hotels. Typically projects that have a couple hundred windows or more, and we work all over the country. This presentation is going to look at the kind of the following chapters. We're going to investigate, when should you restore versus replace? Then we'll dive into the fact versus fiction, because there's a lot of misinformation in the industry that you'll want to be aware of. Then I've got a section that I like that says "Don't do it," and it's some examples of historic window work that went wrong, and so it's always good to know where you shouldn't go. And then we'll finish up. If you're going the restoration route, there are a lot of different things that you might want to consider when you're doing window restoration that aren't that evident, and we're going to review some of those here this morning. All right, on the restore versus replace, some of the factors that would affect your strategy of restoring the existing windows versus replacing them with a new unit. The first thing is what is the historic significance of the property? If your building is not significant and the windows don't have much of a presence, then that's different than, like, this here is the Virginia State Capitol building that was designed by Thomas Jefferson, and we restored every element and saved all the original fabric because it was so significant. But if this is your home, you may want to consider replacement or something different. These are sort of the two ends of the poles on the significance of the building. Another reason that you would want to, let's say, restore versus replace would be it's oftentimes a window like this steel window at Union Station in Kansas City would be too expensive to replicate. And we find that to be the case with steel window restoration quite often. If you are to replace an old historic steel window with a new steel window, it can be 2 to 3 times more expensive than the restoration of the steel. So there are some designs that are much more readily restored than they are replaced. The architectural significance of the windows are important too when you're deciding, do I go restoration or replacement? These buildings here, the windows are a design element, and they're distinct to the design of the building. And if you're to replace them, it's very, very difficult to get a direct match. And the last thing you want to do is to change the exterior appearance of the building when the windows are an important element, as opposed to these buildings that are more industrial. It really doesn't matter whether the window is a storefront, hollow metal, or vinyl, as opposed to the buildings we just looked at. Your budget will determine whether you restore or replace. The building on the right is the Minnesota State Capitol, and they have had a $350 million restoration budget. And here's a hotel that was done on a shoestring budget, and there's a big difference between the two. You know, it depends here. What you're going to do with the windows depends upon what sort of you know, economic factors will influence the window decision. Many wood windows on the interior will have detailed millwork, casing, and maybe interior shutters, and other associated interior woodwork, stools, and you may even have an interior storm window that's an integral part of the window system. And to replace all of that could be you know, much more expensive and time consuming than to do the restoration. That's an important factor too. The age of the building. It makes the building more susceptible to restoration, I believe. This is a Thomas Hunter Hall, which is in Manhattan, and we did the window restoration on the windows because it's a significant part of the neighborhood and has been for decades. And to alter the look of this building, you know, would directly impact the neighborhood. All right, so on the fact versus fiction, like I said, if you really dive into the window question, and you Google, you know, should I replace my windows? You'll get all kinds of information, and much of it is garbage, and then much of it also is very misleading, and the media can be a very dangerous place to find a direction when it comes to windows. So I'm going to dive into what you know, facts versus fiction. There are a lot of people that think that old windows are beyond repair, and they'll look at you look at a window and you'll see you know, paint peeling, you'll have broken glass, or you'll have leaks around the system, or you'll have a window sash that will not open. That doesn't necessarily mean that the windows are beyond repair. It just means that the windows haven't been finished in the last 30 years. Or a rope that was holding the bottom saps up needs to be replaced. To give you an example, on the left is a building, office building in Albany, New York, and that's what the window looked like prior to restoration. and then on the right is the restored version. And the rusted hardware, the degraded wood, the finishes that have failed many years ago can be restored. And it's amazing what we can do to breathe new life into wood or steel windows and make them, essentially new again. Here's a version of a steel window restoration, and these were these steel windows came out of the alumni hall at Vanderbilt University, and the one on the left, that's a typical condition. So we made repairs to the caning on the glass, and we then removed all of the existing finishes, made repairs to the rusted steel. We had to maybe weld some sections or used special restoration epoxies to fill pits in the steel, and then powder coated all the steel surfaces, reglazed, and then reinstalled into the building. So you've got a 100-plus-year-old steel window on the left. It looks like garbage, but with a little love and some technical know-how, you can make it new again on the right. The window manufacturers will promote a lot of confusing messages. And just the other day, I saw a Facebook ad that was generated by one of the major window manufacturers that said that their glass is 73% more energy efficient than single pane. And if you look at the double asterisks on that statement at the base of the ad, you find out that they're referencing a metric called solar heat gain coefficient, which is not something that people spend much time thinking about. So they make it sound like your old window is not going to be as energy efficient, and many of these manufacturers have been slammed by the FTC because of misleading information like that. Because it's understood when you list these ads that you could save 50% on your energy bills by replacing your windows, and that's it's closer to maybe 10% by replacing your windows, depending on the condition of your existing system. We have done a lot of window testing, and where we will do a restoration of an existing wood or steel window, and then we'll subject it to air and water testing, and then also we'll test it for the U value and solar heat gain, because some of the large projects that we work on, the energy performance of a restored window is very important. And what we determined is we can make an old wood window or steel window function very similar to a replacement window. Our air infiltration, we can actually make them more airtight than the replacement windows. The U value is the replacement. If it has the low E glass and argon filled glass, it may perform slightly better on the U value than a single pane with a storm window. And it might be a little bit better with the solar heat gain coefficient. But it's very, very close to the old, restored window to one of the modern energy efficient systems of today. Here's some examples of the kind of testing that we've done. On the lower left, this is a project in Chicago. And this is how we hook up a restored window in the field and do pressurized water tests on the system. And the upper right, we do structural testing on restored windows too. We've even done tests on shooting 2x4s at historic windows to see whether they meet Florida's standards for hurricanes. We've have done ballistic tests on our windows too for security areas of state capitals we've done work on. One of the reasons that you would want to save a old wood window is because the wood in a 100-year-old window is considered gold. And the reason it is it came from an old growth tree that has very tight growth rings. And on the left-hand side, you'll see the old growth wood, and the rings, growth rings, are very, very tight. The new growth wood that is used on all new wood windows will have a growth ring of a quarter inch or more, and the density of old growth versus new growth is profound. I would say your old growth wood is probably twice as dense as the new growth. And what your new wood window manufacturers will do is they need to apply chemicals to prevent wood rot, or to reduce the effects of wood rot. The old growth wood is already behaves that way. It doesn't rot. We've had old wood windows that we've restored that that haven't been painted in 40 years, and the wood is still very very intact and restorable. One of the benefits of a new window replacement is that they'll have insulated glass, which can have coatings on it that help its energy performance, and that's a good thing. But it has a limited lifespan, and no one really pays much attention to that. I mean, we pay attention to what our lifespan is for our roofing materials, right? You buy a 25 or a 40-year roof, but no one really pays attention to the glass that they're getting in a window replacement. And what you see here, these are windows, wood windows that were replaced in, I think this is 11 years later, on an office building outside of Boston that had wholesale seal failure on all the windows. And it's hard to determine exactly when your insulated glass is going to fail. It will probably fail within the first 30 years at some point. And on a replacement window, that means you're going to have to replace the window. They're not designed to have the glass repaired, and it's just the way they're made. There is, if you look at the ads from the window replacement guys, they'll tell you that window replacement is a good investment. That if you replace your windows, you will see added value to your home or your building, and that's becoming less and less the case. There's much more information out there now that where retaining the historic fabric of a historic building, such as the windows, that's the direction that a lot of people are going, because that is that's the original building. And another thing that we confront as a society is that in the United States, we live in a disposable society. And so the replacement windows manufacturers will capitalize on this. That if something looks like it's broken, then replace it. We replace our iPhone when they go bad, or our television. You don't take them in to get fixed, or very rarely would you, because it costs more to fix a television than it does to buy a new one. If you look at some of the clothing retailers, like I've got two daughters that they love Forever 21 and H&M, and their clothing is disposable because it's only designed for one season. And your major window manufacturers are making windows that are going to be disposable within the next 30 years. So if that's the direction that you want for your building, then that you just recognize that that's what you're doing. The hardware on historic windows is usually we find to be brass, and some of it can be very detailed and ornate. The newer hardware that you'll find on replacement windows is typically aluminum, and it's it breaks pretty easily. It is not ornate, and it has no architectural value. So there's a big difference there. The balance system that balances the sash, we work with double hung windows quite often. I would say that's probably the most prominent design of historic windows that we see. And the sash on a historic wood double hung is balanced by a counterweight and pulleys, and the pulleys are typically brass, and the counterweights are attached by either a chain or a rope. The rope will last about 50 to 75 years before it needs to be replaced. And the system will work for hundreds of years if it's maintained. On the converse, your replacement windows will have what they call a block and tackle system. That is, it's a spring balanced system that has a very minor cord, a nylon cord that attaches to the sash, and the spring will lose its tension, and the cord will break very easily. It's probably the most repaired item on a replacement window that you'll find. So the difference in the operation of the windows is huge on a historic window versus a replacement window. Here's a cross section of a replacement window, and one of the problems that the replacement guys have is to protect the wood, and because this new growth wood rots, and so most of the wood window manufacturers will put aluminum or vinyl around the exterior components of the frame and the sash. And you see on this detail, there's aluminum on the exterior portions. That's all good. The aluminum doesn't need to be painted as much as let's say a wood surface. But if you look at this detail, yeah, and I think I've got another. Oh, I didn't. Let's see. Well, and that, I just messed up. But on that detail, the water can get behind the cladding, and that's after about 10 years. If you don't seal up that cladding, you'll have water migrate behind it, and you will have some wood rot resulting. All right, this picture here are some steel windows that have very decorative, what they call muntins, and this would be very, very complicated to effectively translate into a replacement window. And so if you have a window that has such distinct designs like this, this is where you would want to do restoration. More commonly, you would see this, let's say, with stained glass. You would want to do the restoration on stained glass or leaded glass rather than do a replacement work. Here are some pictures of some replacement windows. One is 3 years old. The green window on the left is a train station in Salt Lake that the wood is starting to separate. On the right is a wood window replacement. You can see the plastic jam liner, and the brick mold in the frame is just, you know, rotting out from the inside out, and it's only 8 years old. So, you know, these are the realities of replacement windows. Here are some aluminum clad wood windows, and people get, you know, think that you never have to maintain them, you never have to paint them. Well, you probably have to paint them every 20 years, maybe not every 10 like you would a wood window, but you will, as you see in this picture, after 20 years, you're going to be replacing or refinishing your aluminum. On the this is an interesting picture. Your replacement window manufacturers have a way to make the replacement simple, and the way they do that is that they'll fit a replacement window inside the frame of the existing wood window. And that way you don't have to take out the old wood window. You just fit the replacement inside the frame. And then you can put aluminum on the old wood frame on the outside, and you've got a new window. The problem with this strategy is you're setting the replacement window inside the frame, and you're reducing the amount of glass that you have. And this picture will show you the first level windows, those three in the first level, are going to be restored. We restored them, and the ones above it were replaced, and they're the same window opening, the same dimension on the width. But look how reduced the amount of glass there is, and we see this quite often, where you can completely change the look of a building by slapping in a replacement window inside the old existing wood window frame. The weather strippings that we run into for historic windows are distinct. They're typically on the left-hand side. It's a bronze or brass metal weather stripping, which lasts forever and does a very effective job of keeping air and water out. And we've subjected these historic weather stripping profiles to hundreds of air and water tests, and they perform wonderfully well. And like I said, the system will last forever. As opposed to your more modern weather strippings, which tend to be silicone based or plastic based, which will lose its tensile strength and will begin to malfunction over a period of 10 to 20 years. All right, now that we're going to head into the next section of don't do it. And I'm just going to share some pictures that I've compiled over the years of historic buildings where a replacement has been introduced that has dramatically changed the look of the building. And you can see here in this picture in front of us that we had a really nice masonry opening with a limestone sill, and it was decided to reduce the size of the window to a simple replacement awning, and completely changing the look of the building. And I guess I don't want to sound like I'm picky, but I think that you owe it to the building to respect its presence and its architectural integrity. You know, here's a building that had, these were once double hung windows, and they someone figured out that they put a sliding glass door in the same opening that the double hung window was once resided. And so these are just sliding glass doors that have been affixed into place as a replacement, and completely changing the front facade of the building. Here's you see this a lot, where you've got an arched window that has been filled in to accommodate a basic vinyl replacement. The reason this was done is that some of these vinyl window manufacturers don't want to do arches like that. Some don't want to do a window that big, and it gets expensive to build a radius window. But as you can see, this poor building that was, once, quite interesting, has has a complete different, perspective now. And here's another example of fill-ins to accommodate a reduced standard size replacement. We see this a lot. These were once historic wood windows that were double hung, and in a nice punched openings in a masonry structure that were replaced with an aluminum window that had a fixed unit over an awning that comes close to making a double hung window, but not exactly. And the glass that you see here too has got a reflective coating that looks modern and changes the look too, just from the reflectivity of the glass. So it really does an injustice to the building's presence. This was a high school in Salt Lake, where they replaced wood double hungs with a system that's it's made by Calwall as the manufacturer, and it's an FRP fiberglass system with a awning window below it, and so it's very energy efficient. But oh my gosh, does it take a beautiful entry to a high school and completely change the look. This is an office building in Buffalo, New York, and was fortunate enough to get the picture of the existing system. That brown window in the top left has two double hungs that are flanking a big picture window, and then they've got windows above it, transom windows with multi lights, and these were all replaced with just a tubular fixed aluminum system that is completely different. The nice colors and everything fits the opening right. It keeps the weather out. But look at that. Look at the building. I mean, look at the masonry and how beautiful that is. And it's just a kind of a crime that the windows were replaced in this manner. Here's a window replacement. And I don't know why this was done, but the maroon windows on the left are the existing, and then the replacement is a replacement that has unequal sash. I don't know why that was done. Maybe they got a special buy on it. Once again, let's not go here, because you're changing what it was once a beautiful building with the replacement window. Okay, now that we know what what sort of factors we consider restoration versus replacement, and then we took a good look at the fact versus fiction in the window industry, and now we've looked at places you shouldn't go when you're looking at windows. It helps to look at if you were to choose to go the restoration route, what should you look out for, and what should you incorporate in your project, because there's a lot to understand. Number one is we're dealing with old windows that have lead paint, and sometimes there is asbestos in the glazing compound, and the industry is much more adept at dealing with hazardous materials than it was 20, 30 years ago. And people have training and equipment to negotiate hazmat. But you want to be prepared for that. And one of the things that we make a big effort to do is when we are removing existing finishes, the wood needs to be fully neutralized before we apply new finishes. And we have seen in the past where people have forgotten to do that. This is an interesting technique that we have been incorporated with our window restoration. We can take a historic wood window and route out the sash so that it can accommodate an insulated glass if that is desired. And because the historic windows had most of them have 1/8 to 1/4 inch plate glass, and we can insert a 1/2 inch insulated, and we can then convert an old historic window into an energy performing match to a replacement. When we do the restoration on historic wood windows, we spend a lot of time removing old punky wood and then applying epoxy. And I would say most of our wood window restoration involves a two-part epoxy. One is a liquid epoxy that will penetrate the wood fibers and harden the wood, and it will eliminate any further deterioration of the wood. Then, like you see here we have removed a lot of of wood filings, we will use another epoxy filler. It's like a wood filler, but it's made of two-part epoxy that will fill cracks and gouges and areas of the wood that are missing. So the epoxy work it can do wonders for bringing an old wood system back to life. Much of our glazing work, when we're inserting the glass, is it involves putty, and putty is a great medium for keeping the air and water out, and it'll perform for, I'd say 50 years before it needs to be replaced if you're using the right putty. And the important things to note on putty is that you want to let it cure, and it takes about 2 weeks for it to cure prior to applying your finishes. And you don't want to apply the finishes too early, or they'll pucker, or they might mold, and you'll benefit by having someone that has a background in glazing windows with this type of technique. We also see, instead of putty, windows that will have a exterior wood stop applied to retain the glass. And this is a picture that I found of a stop that was applied with a nail that was a ferrous nail that began to rust, and when it began to rust, then the finishes failed, and then when the finishes failed, it began to absorb moisture, and then the whole window sash started to go. So if you use wood stops, in fact, if you're using nails or screws on any exterior surface of windows whatsoever, they should be stainless, and never use a ferrous nail or screw on an exterior application whatsoever. We do a lot of our own painting, and so that we can apply preservative treatments in our plant, that we make sure that the primer and the finish paint are from the same manufacturer, and that we involve the paint manufacturers and have them come to our plant or come to a project site to review our application of the paints, so that they will sign off that the paint is adhering properly, and that we've got the right mill thickness, and it's a good common sense way to make sure that your finishes are going to benefit you in the long term. Here's an example of a sill that had a primer that failed, and it's only a couple of years old, and you don't want to have to refinish your windows. You want to do it right to begin with, and involving the paint manufacturer up front is a good way to do that. This was a building in Birmingham, Alabama, where the old original wood window frame had been restored, and the lead paint had been removed, and they neglected to neutralize the frame and painted over it, and the stripper was still impregnated in the wood and caused the new paint finishes to degrade within the first year. So neutralizing strippers is a huge element of window restoration. We check our mill thicknesses of our paint finish. This tool you see here is a non-destructive mill thickness gauge that will tell you whether you have enough paint on the surface. It's just a good way to quality control the paint finishes. Adhesion tests I mentioned before. If you've got a big project, Sherwin-Williams or Benjamin Moore will come out to a project site and conduct a adhesion test to make sure that everything has been done properly. When you're doing a window restoration, it really helps to have a mock-up. Most of the projects we work on have very detailed specifications and project documents, but it really helps to have a sample of a fully restored window for everybody to look at and serve as the basis of design for the whole project. So I think a mock-up is critical to, beginning stage for any restoration project. The moisture content of any wood being used, whether it's restored or any new wood, is so important. And this gauge that you see here, it will give us a reading of what the moisture is. And if the wood is too moist, we're shooting for anything from like 5 to 12% moisture content, and if you get much beyond that, your paint finishes and you can be compromised, and the wood can separate and move, so it's important to start with the right content of the moisture before you even begin. This is the Lignamat is the name of the manufacturer of this device, and there's several other that are in the industry that will gauge moisture content. If you neglect to do that, here's a door panel that had a high moisture, and it was also exposed to direct sunlight, and this is what you get. And not a situation that anyone wants to experience. What type of wood you use when you're doing restoration work, if you're replacing sills, or you've got components that need to be replaced, like brick mold, or if you've got an old sash that couldn't be restored and you need to manufacture a new one, it helps to use the right type of wood that matches, but also one that is going to perform over time. I'm not a big fan of new growth pine, but we've had a lot of success with mahogany and sapelli mahogany, African mahogany. We've used Spanish cedar, cypress, Douglas fir. There's also a wood named Akoya that's used widely in Europe. It has a 50-year warranty against rot above ground without a finish. So you can, it's more durable than teak. And we do a lot of work with Akoya because of its durability and its integrity. It's probably the closest thing to old growth that one can use today. And what Akoya is it's acetylated wood, and they expose the wood to this vinegar solution that's completely impregnates the wood, and it changes the molecular structure of the wood so that it doesn't absorb moisture. And if it doesn't absorb moisture, then it's not going to rot. And we've been using this Akoya for almost 20 years now. Here's something that they would be wary of. If you use mahogany, mahogany is a red wood that has these red tannins that can bleed through finishes that are applied to the exterior. And so you'll want to use primers that are stain blocking, that have stain blocking characteristics. And you can see that was not done on this piece of wood on this frame. And I just bring that to the forefront so that if you are using mahogany on an exterior application, make sure that every surface has been treated with a stain blocking primer. On finishes, it really helps to use the best that you can find. This was a school that we did in Buffalo, New York, and the documents called for Sherwin-Williams base A100 finish, which is one of their old finishes that I think they still make, but and it's a very low price point. They've got so many better finishes out there today, and you can see on the horizontal surfaces where the finishes have peeled off, and this was probably taken in about 8 years, which is, it shouldn't look like this. So if you're using Benjamin Moore or Sherwin-Williams, use their best finishes. It may cost 2 to 3 times more, but they're very, very much worth it. If you have someone fabricate some historic windows and do custom fabrication, make sure that they use the same joinery that the original windows used. This was a job that we ran into where the replica window was built like a wood cabinet door that you'd find in a kitchen, and was bolted with a lag bolt rather than a mortise and tenons joint that the originals had. And this what you're looking at here won't last like the original. You might get 30 years out of this rather than 150 years. this. It's a big difference. So the original joinery is the best way to go with mortise and tenon joints. This is a steel window. On steel windows, your finishes are much different than on wood. Don't attempt to use the Sherwin-Williams duration or that you would on a wood window on a steel. Sherwin-Williams, Benjamin Moore, they have direct to metal finishes. There's another brand called Tnemec that is only makes steel related finishes, and so there are a lot of options there. But the steel's a whole different animal when it comes to finishes, because you are containing rust and want to prevent rust from degrading the finish over time. Here's a steel window that's been primed, and now it has the putty put in place. And I would just, if you've selected your finishes and you're going to use things like putty, just make sure that they all will work together, because you can get yourself in trouble by introducing a putty or a caulking that may have a negative reaction to the finishes that you're using. And just double check with the paint manufacturer prior to selecting all of those components. If you get if you're looking at the replacement windows, it's important to understand how the system that you're evaluating is going to match up with the existing windows. And your window manufacturers will have details like you see here, where you can look at the frame and the sash and all of the dimensions associated with that. So you can look at the head of the window and the meeting rail of the window and the bottom rail of the window, and see how close that comes to the dimensions of your original wood window. So if you go the replacement route, what you want to make sure is that those dimensions are as close as possible. And then the other thing would be the glass. You want to make sure that its reflectivity is very comparable to the single pane glass that was in the system. So, and that, my folks, is the end of the presentation. I think I ran a little over, did I not?
Oh, you're fine, Brooks. This was a really, really good comprehensive presentation. Like you and Kelly and I had discussed earlier, windows come up in almost daily life, both within the preservation realm as well as Main Street. So this was great. This was great stuff. I've got quite a few questions in the Q&A box, so I'll just kind of go through those one at a time. First question, how can we convince contractors to do this type of work? More often than not, they say it's not possible to do this type of work because they do not know how to.
Yeah, that is one of the big challenges with restoration, is to find somebody that can do it. And I would use the internet to begin with, to see if you can find somebody. There's an alliance called the Window Preservation Alliance. has probably about 200 members, and you might be able to find someone there. And then even what I would do too is that if you can't find anybody, you're looking for somebody that has a craftsman that's been in the business for 30 plus years, will know how to deal with historic windows, because they know woodworking, they know finishing, they know glazing, and they know how these windows are built. So you may just ask around for somebody that has a lot of craftsmanship and background in the trades, that may not represent themselves as a window restoration contractor, but knows how to do it.
Next question, how can we recruit and attract people that can do this type of work?
Well, I'll tell you, it's a fascinating industry, and it's a lot of fun, because there's a lot to learn, and when we take somebody that's never done it before and train them, it's a lot. We're seeing more and more interest in the trades, and the problem is a lot of schools got out of the trade programs, and we're seeing more interest now in trades, and so I think that over the next several years, more and more people are going to come to the forefront to be able to do this work.
Next question, where can the studies that you had mentioned during your presentation be found? Is there a way we can are there links out there to those, or do you have those on your website, or?
No, I do not. Many of them are on the internet. And
Okay.
so if you did some Google searching, you'd be able to find many of those. Yeah.
Okay. Next question, your examples mostly show shop restoration of historic windows. Do you ever do on-site restoration with the windows still in place?
We prefer to do our work in the shop. And one of the reasons is we work with projects that have hundreds of windows. And so it's much easier for us to maintain the quality standards and to run that kind of volume through a plant that's already set up for it, rather than try to do that on site with all the other trades. It becomes cumbersome to do that work on site when you've got everything else going on. So
when you do those projects, then do you remove all of the windows at one time, or do you do portions of the building as you go along?
it depends on the schedule. We like to get as much out as we possibly can, and we'll leave the frame in the building, but we'll take the sash and maybe some other components out, and that's what we bring back. And then we'll do the frame restoration in the field.
Great. Next question, thoughts on encapsulant paint on wood windows?
There are encapsulating paint. So to encapsulate the what I guess you might be talking about lead paint. Yeah, and I would prefer to remove existing finishes down to sound substrate rather than just applying and encapsulating the existing finishes, because you get a better finish that will last longer. It costs more because you've got to strip the existing finishes, but we have done jobs where the budget only allowed for painting the exterior with an encapsulated paint. And so it became more of a budget item and not a preferred method.
Great. Final question. Is today's new growth Douglas fir really much better than pine for durability?
Oh, you know, the standards, when you look at the wood standards, it does, but not in a significant way. I would much rather use mahogany than I would Douglas fir, or Akoya that I explained before would be preferable.
Excellent. Well, I don't see any further questions. So I'd like to thank you, Brooks, for presenting this information today, and to Kelly at SHPO for getting this all set up for us. If you have any further questions, there's the information to get a hold of Brooks online there. And if you need to get a hold of either Kelly or I think y'all know how to find us. So we thank you and have a great rest of your afternoon.
Thanks.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Carly.
Yep, bye. Thank you.